Let's take a look at how a domestic monopolist faces international competition, international trade, and how it reacts to tariffs. So we start with the domestic monopolist, and you remember that in monopoly, the only seller faces a demand curve, D, and that means that if it wants to sell more, it has to lower the price. So its marginal revenue will be below the demand curve. In other words, if the monopolist wants to sell more, it has to charge a lower price. As it lowers its price, it can sell more. The quantity demanded goes up, and it will sell more, as we see. But it had to lower the price for all of these other sales, all of these sales that it had to lower the price. Because in our assumption, it's a non-discriminating monopolist. So in order to sell more, it has to lower the price. You imagine a cafe that is a monopolist in a given location. If it wants to sell more coffee, it has to lower the price, but it can't say to all the old customers, you have to pay the old price because you were willing to pay the old price before. Only the new customers are going to pay the new price. So a non-price discriminating monopolist can't do that. So in order to sell more, it has to lower the price. So what does the monopolist do? Well, it finds the quantity of production where the marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and we see that that quantity would be QM here. At that quantity, marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. So marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the equilibrium profit maximizing choice for the monopolist. And then it charges a price up here, PM, the monopoly price, and that's the one that maximizes its profits. So we can think of all this area here as being the profits that go to the monopolist from restricting how much it produces to QM and selling it at a high price. Let's look and see what happens when there's international trade. When there's international trade, we still have the same demand curve, the same marginal cost curve, but now we have the world price, and at that world price, consumers can import as much as they like, so the monopolist can no longer charge a price higher than the world price because everybody would just buy from the world market. They would just buy the imports. So now we see that the monopolist acts just like competitive firms. The monopolist sells this amount of production. That's the domestic production by the monopolist. That's the point at which the monopolist's revenue, which is just the price, the world price, equals its marginal cost. So at this quantity here, the firm's marginal cost is up here, and the price is there. And so price equals marginal cost. That's how much the monopolist will sell. At that price, there's still demand. Demand is out here. And so the gap is what is imported. If we put a tariff on, then we can imagine a small tariff of T, so we have PW plus T. This situation is exactly the same as with a competitive industry. The monopolist produces more now because at the original price, what's equal to marginal cost. Now with the tariff, the price is above marginal cost, so there's incentives to increase production. Consumers demand less, so consumption demand falls a little bit. Imports shrink a little bit. Consumer welfare is reduced. Producer welfare goes up. Government tariff revenue collection is represented by this box here, and the two triangles there are the deadweight loss, A and D, as how Feenstra and Taylor call it. So those are the effects of monopolist under a tariff. Behaves just like a competitive industry. So a tariff, international trade, limits the power of a monopolist. A quota, however, is a bad way to if there is international trade. A quota is a bad way to regulate a monopolist, and we'll see why. If this is the demand curve that people face, basically a quota means the demand curve shifts back by M, which is the amount of the quota, so imports. And of course our assumption here is that the world price for those imports is below the domestic price, so people would rather purchase imports, which are cheaper, but because there's a quota, they're limited by how many imports they can buy. So this demand curve then is the demand curve that the monopolist faces, and hence the monopolist has a marginal revenue curve, and the monopolist chooses a quantity to produce where the marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then the monopolist charges a price way up here, and that's incidentally the price that consumers will have to pay for imports. Remember, consumers can't pay the low price for imports because there aren't very many imports. Imports are limited by the quota. So the firms that are exporting and that have the import quota get to charge price PM. The monopolist charges price PM. Monopolist makes profits. The imports are all making profits because they're selling at PM, which is far above the world price. So consumer surplus is greatly reduced because of this. I just want to remind you of one thing when we're talking about monopolists, that where does this marginal revenue equal marginal cost condition come from? The monopolist is maximizing profits, which we represent by pi, and it's choosing Q, so it's choosing Q to maximize profits. So we have the profits are the price times the quantity minus the costs. We take the derivative, and we get the condition marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal revenue minus marginal cost equals 0.